An old black mechanic named Elijah had spent more than 40 years fixing engines that everyone else had given up on. His repair shop sat alone beside an old highway, surrounded by rusted signs, broken tractors, and forgotten memories. The faded wooden board above the entrance simply read, "Elijah's Garage." Most people drove past without noticing it, but those who stopped always left with more than a repaired vehicle. They left with hope. Elijah was 71 years old. His hands were rough, his back ached every morning, and gray filled his beard, but his eyes still carried kindness. Every bolt he tightened and every engine he restored reminded him of the promise he had made to his late wife years ago. No matter how hard life gets, she had once told him, never stop helping people. He never did. One cold autumn evening, dark clouds rolled across the sky. Rain began falling harder than anyone expected. Thunder echoed through the hills while strong winds bent the trees beside the highway. Elijah was preparing to close the garage when he heard distant motorcycle engines. At first they sounded confident. Then one after another they began sputtering. Moments later 6 large touring motorcycles rolled into his muddy parking lot before dying completely. The riders climbed off, soaked from head to toe. Leather jackets, heavy boots, long beards, each bike carried thousands of miles of road dust. They looked like experienced bikers who had seen every highway in America. Their leader, a tall man named Jack, removed his helmet. "Sorry to bother you this late," he said. "Our bikes all started acting up after we hit that flooded road." Elijah smiled. "Looks like you boys picked the right place." The younger bikers looked around the tiny garage. Old tools, ancient shelves, rusty equipment. One whispered quietly, "I don't think this place even has electricity half the time." Another laughed. "These bikes are worth more than this building." Elijah heard every word. He simply nodded. "Push them inside." The bikers exchanged doubtful glances. Still, they rolled every motorcycle into the garage. Elijah slowly inspected the first engine. He listened, touched the fuel lines, checked the spark plugs, smelled the gasoline. Then he quietly walked to an old cabinet and pulled out a handmade metal tool no one recognized. Jack watched carefully. "You know these engines." Elijah chuckled. "Son, I worked on motorcycles before your father learned to ride a bicycle." Within minutes he found the problem. Floodwater had contaminated the fuel systems. Several electrical connectors had also become soaked. The younger bikers expected him to order expensive replacement parts. Instead Elijah carefully dried each connector, cleaned every fuel line, rebuilt clogged filters using spare materials from older engines, and adjusted every carburetor with astonishing precision. Hour after hour he worked while rain pounded the roof. Not once did he complain. Not once did he stop. The bikers began watching silently. No one laughed anymore. Every movement Elijah made came from decades of experience. By midnight the first motorcycle roared back to life. The sound echoed across the storm. The riders stared in disbelief. Then the second bike started. Then the third. One by one every motorcycle came alive. Jack couldn't hide his smile. "I've taken these bikes to dealership mechanics who couldn't diagnose problems this fast." Elijah wiped grease from his hands. "Machines tell you what's wrong if you know how to listen." The younger bikers looked embarrassed. One finally admitted, "Sir, we judged you." Elijah smiled kindly. "That happens." Jack reached into his wallet. "How much do we owe you?" Elijah looked toward the rain outside. "You've got a long ride ahead." He handed the money back. "Buy yourselves breakfast tomorrow." The bikers froze. "No charge. You needed help." Jack insisted. Elijah refused again. Finally Jack shook his hand. "We won't forget this." The motorcycles disappeared into the rainy darkness. Elijah closed the garage. He believed the story had ended there. He was wrong. Before sunrise the next morning Elijah unlocked the garage. As he reached for the light switch, he heard something unusual. Engines. Dozens of them. Deep rumbling echoed across the empty highway. He stepped outside. What he saw made him completely speechless. Motorcycles stretched farther than he could see. Hundreds. Maybe more. Chrome reflected the rising sun. American flags waved gently behind them. Veterans. Families. Police officers. Firefighters. Construction workers. Doctors. Teachers. Bikers from clubs across several states. They filled the highway in perfect silence. Jack slowly rode to the front. He removed his helmet. "We told a few friends about what happened." Elijah looked beyond him. There weren't a few. There were nearly 300 riders. Jack smiled. "Turns out they wanted to meet the man who refused to take our money." Elijah stood frozen. One elderly veteran stepped forward carrying a folded American flag. "We heard you've spent decades helping stranded travelers." Another rider carried boxes filled with new tools. A construction company owner stepped out of a truck behind the motorcycles. He unfolded large blueprints. "We also heard your roof leaks." Another truck arrived. Then another. Inside were lumber, concrete, brand new lifts, modern diagnostic equipment, air compressors, professional tool cabinets, paint, windows, electrical supplies. Elijah looked confused. "What is all this?" Jack smiled. "A thank you." The construction owner continued. "My crew volunteered." The equipment supplier added, "Everything's already paid for." A local restaurant owner unloaded hot breakfast for everyone. School children arrived carrying handmade thank you cards. The county mayor appeared with city officials. One television reporter set up cameras. The story had spread overnight across social media. Millions of people had watched videos recorded by the bikers. Videos showing an elderly mechanic refusing payment after working for hours in the rain. People everywhere were inspired. Reporters asked Jack why hundreds of bikers had traveled so far. His answer became unforgettable. Because good people shouldn't grow old believing no one notices. Construction began immediately. Bikers removed old roofing. Electricians rewired the building. Painters restored every wall. Mechanics installed modern equipment. Carpenters built new offices. Volunteers cleaned decades of dust from every shelf. Even children planted flowers around the entrance. Elijah tried helping. Everyone stopped him. "No," they laughed. "Today you sit." For the first time in years, Elijah simply watched. Tears slowly filled his eyes. By sunset his tiny broken garage had become one of the finest repair shops in the county. But the surprises weren't over. Jack invited Elijah outside once more. Parked beside the garage sat a beautiful vintage pickup truck. Completely restored, paint shining, engine purring smoothly. Elijah instantly recognized it. It had once belonged to his father. He had sold it nearly 30 years earlier when medical bills became overwhelming. He believed he'd never see it again. Jack handed him the keys. "It took us months to track it down." Elijah couldn't speak. His knees nearly gave out. He gently placed one hand on the truck's hood. This can't be real." Jack smiled. "It belongs home." The crowd erupted into applause. Even hardened bikers wiped tears from their faces. That evening Elijah finally spoke to everyone. Gathered outside, "I spent my whole life believing small acts of kindness disappeared into the world." He paused. "I was wrong." He looked across hundreds of smiling faces. "Kindness doesn't disappear. It travels. It grows. And one day, it comes home." The crowd stood in complete silence. Many cried openly. The story spread across television, newspapers, and online platforms throughout the country. Thousands of travelers began visiting Elijah's garage, not just to repair motorcycles or trucks, but to shake the hand of a man who had reminded everyone that character matters more than appearance. Young mechanics volunteered to learn from him. Veterans gathered there every month. Families stopped during road trips simply to hear his stories. Elijah never became rich. He never wanted fame. But he gained something far more valuable. He discovered that a lifetime of doing the right thing creates a legacy no amount of money can buy. Years later, after Elijah finally retired, the garage remained open under the care of young mechanics he had trained. Above the entrance hung a new wooden sign. It carried the original name, but underneath someone had carved a second message. "Kindness keeps every engine running." Travelers still stop there today. Some need repairs, others simply need hope. Every person who walks through those doors hears the same lesson Elijah shared until his final day. You never know who you're helping. You never know who's watching. And you never know when one simple act of kindness will return to you multiplied beyond anything you ever imagined. Because respect is never earned through wealth. Honor is never measured by appearance. And the strongest engines in this world are not built from steel. They are built from compassion, humility, and the courage to help a stranger without expecting anything in return.